Hi, I'm Ellen Condon with the University of Montana's Rural Institute on Disabilities and also an associate at Mark Golden Associates. Today I'm going to be talking with you about the process of discovery as a strategy for gaining employment for people with significant disabilities. Before I launch into what discovery is, I want to talk about clarifying what customized employment is. And customized employment is a very effective strategy for gaining access to paid community employment for individuals who don't compete well. And each position is uniquely developed and negotiated for that individual based on who they are. In order for us to customize a job for somebody, we need to first get to know them, which is the process of discovery, and therefore discovery is the foundation of customized employment. We need to understand the person's interests, we need to understand preferences. Most importantly, we need to understand the conditions under which they're going to be successful in employment. Because we're accessing employment in a different way, in customized, we're going to be looking at negotiating a one-of-a-kind position for this individual. We're going to be making a proposal on behalf of the individual to an employer who may match their ideal conditions and also may be in need of the tasks and the contributions that they offer. For us to be effective as job developers, what we need to do first is intensely understand the individual, to understand what they're going to bring to the employer, but also what they need in terms of characteristics to be successful at that job. We're not talking about getting to know them so we have a dream job. We're really talking about setting them up for success. And we're talking about, most likely, job seekers that haven't had access to paid employment in the community because they're not competitive. What we do know now is that through a strategy such as customized employment, we can look at their contributions and we can effectively negotiate paid positions for individuals if we start with who they are and we don't approach employment through a competitive process. So today we're going to be talking about discovery. Again, I need to know what the ideal conditions for success are for each individual. And so I'm going to be looking at getting to know what their impact of disability is. What characteristics do they need in a work environment to be successful? How predictable does it need to be? What do the tasks look like? Are there work materials that would be effective for them, work materials that wouldn't work for them? For instance, I'm working with a woman right now who seems to interact better with materials that are far more rigid. If the materials are too flexible or flimsy, then she has difficulty manipulating them. For somebody else, the ideal condition or a ideal condition for success may be the amount of movement involved in their job and their task and the ability to take quick breaks to go walk around. For somebody else, it may be that we need to understand how concrete their tasks are and that it's very clear to them what's next, when the task is finished, and how much they have to complete. So as we're trying, that's the ultimate of what we want to find out. And so in discovery, we're going to be looking across the entire life of this individual. So things that may not appear to be employment relevant initially are going to lead to, they're going to give us clues about what this person needs in terms of ideal characteristics of employment. So one area is the individual's complexities. You know, many people have been screened out of employment previously because of behavioral challenges. What I need to understand is, what environments do we avoid? You know, is this somebody that just isn't going to be successful in an environment with a lot of breakables in it? We're looking for a sturdy environment. Is this an individual who certain sounds, noises, lighting, smells lead them to be unsuccessful? So we're going to avoid those. You know, again, it doesn't matter that the person has a behavioral reputation or a challenge. We need to understand its impact, how to prevent it, how to support the person to avoid it or to manage it on the job, and also identify employment environments where it's not going to have major impact. It's not going to lose the person the job if it happens. We also need to know, we're going to be asking questions about the person's responsibilities. We're going to be looking across home, we're going to be looking at school or in an adult program if that's where the individual is now, or possibly they're volunteering or participating in their community. What kind of tasks and responsibilities do they have? And again, we don't want to state whether or not they can do it, we want to look at what they do. And the reason for that is that we want to look at what are the skills that they're exhibiting through that performance, through those tasks, through those responsibilities. What are we learning about how to set them up and prepare them for success? Is it this person does remarkably well with a checklist, either in pictures or in words or using their iPad to sequence tasks, and they're totally independent that way, and they fulfill these responsibilities at the public library perhaps. We're looking for pieces of information that then we can then put into this individual's blueprint for the ideal job, the job where we are predetermining that they are most likely to have success in, and also where they can make the best contribution to an employer. Because in customized employment, it's got to be a win-win situation. It's got to be beneficial to the individual with a disability, but also it's got to be beneficial to the employer's bottom line. Otherwise, there's no reason to hire the person. So we're going to look for skills, we're looking at complexities, we're going to look at other challenges. Maybe this individual's impact of disability is around their health. And so we need to look at how much time it takes them to get ready in the morning. And that's going to impact when they can work. Maybe it's going to impact certain situations that they need to avoid. Maybe it's going to impact the need for personal care on the job. For some folks we work with, maybe it's their mobility that's going to be a bigger challenge in work. And not that it's going to prevent somebody from working. None of this, nothing we learn in Discovery is going to screen somebody out. We're presuming that everybody has something to offer in terms of contributions. It's up to us in Discovery to determine what that is. So if somebody's got some impact of mobility due to their disability, I need to look at how accessible the environment needs to be, and what specifically does accessible mean for this particular person. How big is the restroom? How much room is there around their desk to get to the materials? What height level are things needing to be placed? What kind of supports do they need from coworkers? All of that. So in Discovery, we're really looking at understanding all pieces of the person, and we're really thinking about this person as a puzzle, and it's a challenge for us to figure out what all the pieces are that are relevant to employment that we need to understand and gather to help us come up with this blueprint for an individual job for this person. Now, Discovery, one of the nice pieces of Discovery is that this can be used as an alternative to more traditional assessments. And let me explain to you how this is different. With a traditional assessment, many times they were used to determine whether or not somebody was ready to work. Discovery never screens anybody out. We presume that everybody's ready. It's up to us, the professionals, to determine how and where they're going to be most successful and where they're going to contribute. And so we don't look at what people can't do. We want to understand the challenges around participating and doing work so that we can in effect, negotiate around those tasks or negotiate some accommodations. So we're looking to understand challenges, impact of disability, but again, it's never going to rule or screen somebody out of employment. Some of the traditional assessments have tried to direct people to specific jobs or career paths. In customized employment, we don't start with job titles and career areas. We really are looking for discrete skills and distinct tasks. Because in a customized job, we're going to reassemble tasks into a unique job description for this person. So it doesn't actually make sense for us to have an assessment that leads us to a job or career path. The approaches, many of the traditional approaches to assessment assume that you have to be competitive in order to work. In customized employment, we're removing the whole topic of competition from the table. We don't want to go approach employers who are hiring. We don't want to start with an existing job description because then our individual has to compete against it. And typically in a customized, we're representing somebody who doesn't compete well. So we're looking instead at coming up with a proposal for an employer that consists of tasks we know the person can do or can do with training, and also skills that we know the person has. And these are generalizable skills or transferable skills that we can then use to teach somebody additional tasks that may be unique to that employment place. So that's some of the information that traditional approaches to assessment use. In contrast, what discovery does is we seek to uncover the best of the person. And for each person, that's going to be somewhere different. For one individual, it may be who they are at home. For somebody else, it may be who they are at Boy Scouts, along non-disabled peers. For somebody else, it was actually at their local hospital, and that definitely perplexed me when I first had that suggested by the family. But what the family explained is that that's where this young man is most who he is. He can use his communication device. All the hallways are big and accessible. His motorized chair can move around really easily there. If you want to get to know him in an environment where he's at his best, meet him at the hospital. So for each person, it's going to be unique where they're at their best, but we need to uncover that. And we need to look at why they're at their best there. Because what we're doing is we're uncovering the characteristics that will set them up for success in an employment situation in the community. I want to also see where people are most who they are, meaning where are they most comfortable, where might we see an activity that they participate in where they need the most support, where they need the least support. I also need to understand the impact of disability. The person's label doesn't help me. I need to understand how it impacts how they process information, how I need to support them to get to work, to learn a job, to perform a job. I need to really learn what motivates people too. You know, for folks who have had no experience with money and paychecks, it may not be about that paycheck. I need to really pay attention to what are people internally motivated to do or buy? What are they internally motivated by? Maybe it's about being paid in cash. Maybe it's about, this is somebody who sees that somebody's in need and initiates time after time stepping in and offering assistance. That's a big piece of what motivates them, and for them that may be more important to be offering somebody an extra hand than the paycheck is important for them. Not that we're not going for the paid job, but we've got to really understand what motivates the person, because that may be critical in this person enjoying this job and excelling at the job. The other piece that we're looking for is we're always looking for connections this individual has to employers. And we may start with, who do they know in their neighborhood? What are their relationships with their neighbors? Where do the neighbors spend time? Where do they spend money? Where do they work? We're always looking for connections. And they're not going to be obvious upfront connections. We're going to have to, again, like discovery is kind of a treasure hunt, looking for particular pieces of information. And as you get to know the person better, you start screening out and kind of filtering through the information to determine what are the pieces that are most relevant to work. So the characteristics of discovery, and again, this is real different from some of our traditional assessments. Discovery is optimistic. We don't want to look at a list of barriers the person has, because that's not going to help us in negotiating a job with an employer. We want to look at where they're at their best, how they do things. For instance, one young woman we had worked with, we found that she was very independent at home, and her mom had shared the information that at home it was her responsibility to make her lunch every day for school. And she would go ahead and she would get her lunch container out. She chose to eat a lot of vegetables instead of carbs and snacks and sandwiches. So she would go and she would chop up celery and carrots and put it in a Ziploc bag, put it in her container. She'd pick juices that she wanted. She'd probably also pick some crackers and cheese, some other pieces, and school was just amazed by this report. What they did was when they saw her performance at home, they realized that the mom had used a lot of visual cues around the kitchen. The young woman followed a picture checklist. It was pictures and words in a vertical format, and then also the locations of all the items had a picture on them as well. So the cabinet where the Tupperware was or where the lunch boxes were was labeled. And this young woman used that to prompt her along, to move from step to step. So part of what I want to know is where she was at her best. What supports enable her to be most independent and most participating? Because that's what I want to look for work. The information that we get from discovery is going to be robust information. Instead of saying that she scored a 5 on independence out of 6 in making her lunch, I'm instead going to write down the story of the strategy the mom used of using the visuals to help her move from one piece of the task to the next. And I'm going to describe how she selected items, how she manipulated the Tupperware, the Ziploc bag, how she arranged it in the food container. It's going to be descriptive and such that if I write it narratively, robustly, the next person can pick up that description and see it in their head as well. And the reason for that is that it makes it so much easier as we're consolidating the information and moving from discovery into that individual plan for employment. It makes it so much easier to identify the particular skills, the support strategies, the characteristics that this person needs in support or in a work environment to be successful. It makes all of that information so easy to pick out of that written information. And then that provides the foundation for the tasks, the negotiation with the employer of a one-of-a-kind position for the individual. And again, discovery information, we're going to look at all areas of the person's life. It may not look, for instance, I just met a young man who part of who he is that daily he will get on his motorized trike, he will drive it 15 miles through rural Georgia, and he will go to the pharmacy and pick up prescriptions for his mom and then drive the trike back 15 miles to home. The other piece that he does, which doesn't seem employment relevant at first glance, is he will, whenever somebody is sick or has a birthday or has an anniversary, he will remember that. He will drive his trike again into town and he will purchase the appropriate card, greeting card. He will drive back. He will place his return address label in the top left-hand corner and ask his mother to address the card to the person. He'll stamp it and then mail it. So at first glance, this doesn't look employment related, but we see the skills and we see the contributions. This is a young man who thinks of other people. He identifies the need for a card. He takes the initiative to drive into town, selects an occasion appropriate card. He knows how to, he addresses the label. He uses, instead of writing, he actually uses his return address labels and then asks his mom to address the card. So from that description, I'm seeing skills, I'm seeing personality attributes that an employer would value. I'm also seeing maybe he needs some support around writing, or maybe that's something that we aren't going to include in a job description for him, or we're going to provide an accommodation, such as pre-addressed labels or a typewriter. Not a typewriter, a laptop computer. So what are our strategies for facilitating the process of discovery? These are a lot of informal strategies. Instead of our standardized tests that compare and evaluate and measure, we're going to be doing some informal strategies. We're going to start with a conversation with the individual job seeker and their family, most likely in their home, because typically that's where they're most comfortable, but it's going to be determined by that person and where they're most comfortable. So we're going to start by having a conversation about what Customize is, why we're doing discovery, what we're looking for, and also how much we value the input of that consumer and that family. From that initial conversation, we're going to learn about the person's routines at home, probably in the community as well. We're going to inquire about where they go in the community and people that they spend time with. From there, we're going to determine a plan, and each person's plan for discovery is unique to them. To get to know me, you're going to participate in different activities with me than you are in in getting to know my husband. Like for me, you're going to go to the horse barn. With my husband, you'll probably go fly fishing. It's the same thing for people that we're using the strategy of discovery with to develop this blueprint for employment. We're going to figure out what's meaningful for them. How are we going to get the information that we need to know? So through our initial conversation, we're going to see if we can identify some people that know this job seeker really well, that we could interview with the person's permission. We're also going to identify some activities that we want to participate in with the job seeker. Maybe they're at home, maybe they're at school, maybe they're in the community. We're also going to identify some things that we're going to want to observe because we really want to understand their performance. We want to see their performance, we want to see the skills, and we want to see any support needs, and we want to see if there's some intrinsic motivation there as well. We're also going to participate in some novel activities because that's going to give us a feel for a brand new environment, much like that first day on the job is going to be for the job seeker. Finally, we're going to look at records. If you think about the people that we're most likely to support in customized employment, folks probably have a large file full of not so positive information about them. There's probably a lot of reasons why they can't work in that file. I want to kind of inoculate myself up front by really getting an unbiased notion of who this person is, by really getting to know them, where they're most comfortable, where they're at their best. But I also want to check the file to see, is there anything in there I need to know about before I approach an employer? Is there any information about medical issues that might be relevant now? About legal issues? Any information. And again, in discovery, you're not really sure what's relevant for that job seeker until you start delving into discovery. And for people that we've worked with for a while, we may think we know somebody, we may think we have just the answer to where they need to work. I really encourage you to take a step back and observe performance without your judgment overlaying it. We want to take a step back and relook at what the person does, who they do it with, what supports are needed, also what supports are offered but maybe really aren't needed. Maybe it's just the routine we've gotten into with them. Also, people are going to come with backgrounds and assumptions about them. Any theory we have that we think we know about this person, like this person needs a job inside from 10 to 12 or 10 to 2 or only around women, whatever our assumption is, we need to test that out through this process of discovery and just double check to see if that's really valid. Because many times we assume what we see is what we've got. But, just think about all of us. My behavior in one setting is going to be different than at home. And we find that time and time again with students and with adults with labels of disability. They are influenced by our expectations and the environment's expectations. There was a young man that I began working with years ago, and at school he had this reputation of being very prompt dependent. And when I observed him in the hallway, he was indeed prompt dependent. He got off the bus, he walked through the double doors to the school. The paraprofessional was standing by his locker, so he walked up to her and he stopped. And then she would say, "Go ahead and open your locker." He would open his locker and he would stop. And then she'd say, "Take off your coat and put it in your locker." And you kind of get the picture here. He waited to be told each step of the way. And so the school assumed that's who he was. When we saw him at home, his performance didn't look like that at all. If he wanted a snack, he went and got the snack. If his little sister needed some help from him, she would approach him and ask him, and he would help her out with things. She approached him and wanted water balloons, and so they walked off to the house and filled the balloon with water, and then if he needed help tying it, he would ask somebody who tied better than he did. When we got on his first community-based work experience, we found that this was a young man that if you didn't set up the expectation for him to wait for direction before he was to pursue another task, he didn't wait. He just took initiative. And this was a young man who had a reputation as well about being really slow moving. And again, once on the job site, we actually had to prompt him to slow down. And I'm not sure if I can explain why it was like that, but we had to double check our assumptions. What we thought we knew about him, we really didn't know. We only knew about his performance at school. Also people may come to us with a past or reputation that's not so positive. Again, we need to set that aside and really look at, does this person have a history of aggression because they lived in an unsafe environment and they were protecting themselves? Or were they working with people who didn't give them or didn't recognize their need for personal space? And this person just can't tolerate people talking too much, not giving enough wait time between instructions, because that's how they process information. And they also can't tolerate people being that close or touching them just based on some sensory issues. We need to really double check what we assume we know about somebody, because once we take a step back and re-look and really think about learning where this person's most comfortable, most successful, and how to support them to be most comfortable and most successful, we may realize that they've been in poorly matched environments all along, and that's how they came to have this reputation. And we could really undo that history by supporting them up for success in a job site. So the information that we're looking for in discovery, it's like putting together a puzzle, and that the end completed puzzle is that unique job that we're going to create for this person and negotiate for this person. For each person, the pieces of the puzzle are going to look different. And as you do more discovery, you start to pick some of the relevant features more quickly. But who you talk to, who you interview, what you do for discovery activities, it's all based on that individual. So what are the steps to discovery? Like I mentioned initially, we typically start at home. We visit the person where they're most comfortable. And so typically that's the home. And what I usually do is I sit down in somebody's living room or kitchen table, wherever I'm invited to sit, and talk with them about the process and what our outcome for discovery is. Are we looking for this individual's first paid job? And explaining that they don't have to compete. We're going to design something in a situation that enables them to be successful around what they can do. And so we've really got to spend some time getting to know them. I'll ask about the person's routine. And as the family or the individual is describing the individual's routine, I'm looking for things that they do just because they're motivated to do it, because it's an interest area. I'm looking for support strategies that are used. I'm looking for supports that may be provided, like, maybe the parent wakes the person up every morning, but what we realize is they've never taught the person how to set the alarm on their phone or the alarm on their iPod. And so we can just build that into something new we're going to try with the person, because again, it's going to be real relevant to work as well. I'm going to ask about chores and responsibilities, because I'm going to look at how the family taught this person something new. I'm going to look at the performance around completing a chore. I'm going to look at the skills that might be evident by watching performance doing chores, and also some tasks. I'm also going to look at what activities the person does at home and in the community, because I'm also, in my head and also on paper, I'm coming up with an outline, an itinerary for what I'm going to do for further discovery for this individual. And so again, it's all based on who they are. So if this person volunteers at the public library, I'm going to probably go to the public library with them and just observe. If this person goes to the theater occasionally, and that's one of their favorite activities to do, I may set up a time where I go to the theater with them. Again, I'm looking for supports. I'm looking for supports provided, supports needed. I'm looking for skills. I'm looking for people they're connected to. And initially, I'm not quite sure what I'm looking for. I'm just stepping back and looking. The other piece that I like to do with the person's permission is get a tour of the house and also their bedroom. And what I'm looking for is there any information about who this person is? Are there some family photos that tell me about activities and skills that other people I've talked to about this individual didn't have? They didn't have that information. In one person's room, the folks who were doing discovery saw her closet. She was showing them her closet, and what they saw is that each turtleneck, each vest, and each pair of pants was set up into outfits, and it was all organized by color. And so they turned to the mom and they said, "Wow, how do you have time to do all that?" And mom said, "Oh, I don't do that. That's her. She initiates when her laundry comes out of the wash and out of the dryer. She puts together the outfits that she wants to wear to school, and she organizes all that." So just from seeing that piece of performance, we get a whole lot of information about the person's skills, their attributes, and potential tasks for an employer. The next step is that we're going to conduct some interviews. And again, we want rich, descriptive information from these interviews. We want to know people who have some other pieces to the puzzle of who this person is and what we need for characteristics of a successful job. So we may be interviewing siblings. We may be interviewing somebody from swim team if this person's part of the swim team. In one case, we interviewed somebody's neighbor, because this was a man that this student typically went over and helped on weekends. And actually the mom did the interview of the neighbor and found out lots of information about her son's skills and abilities that she had no idea he had, because he'd been over there helping this guy fix his truck, and he'd been basically selecting tools and delivering them to the man as he's laying under his truck fixing it. And nobody had any idea that this young man knew the names of tools or where they went and could go get them and return them to where they went upon request. We might interview past support staff, job coaches, employers, anybody who has a piece of information about this individual. And so some tips to conducting an interview: we really want to sit back and let who we're interviewing speak. We want to try and not lead them. And we also want to start with some open-ended questions. And now, if people aren't familiar with the process of discovery, they may assume that you just want the answer. And you really don't. You want them to describe the performance if they express an opinion about somebody, about a skill, about a support need, we really want them to expand on that, because anything that we record in discovery, we want to make sure that we back it up with some data. Either we saw it or somebody shared that information, but we want to make sure that it's not just a past reputation, it's a historical piece of information. We want them to describe what they saw. So if somebody says, oh, this person's really prompt dependent, you're going to need a job coach with them all the time. My question back is going to be, can you describe to me what you see on a given day when you're working with them? You're going to capture that information. We're going to ask, can you give me an example of that? If they say, this person loves kids, can you tell me what they do around kids? Because just because somebody has an interest, we want to make sure before we go to an employer that we know they have skills and abilities, and we've got some tasks to really offer to the employer, and we really understand the features of an environment and of the job that are going to lead the person to be successful. So it's going to be a conversational tone, even though there may be some specific pieces of information that we are looking for from that individual. There's going to be a reason we selected them to interview. The other piece, the next step for discovery, is thinking about what are some familiar activities that we want to either observe the job seeker in or participate in with the job seeker. And again, this information typically comes from hearing about their routine at home, at school, places they go in the community. For one individual, a team of us were doing discovery at our house, and we asked the family, what would she do at home that would give us the best information about who she is? And they said, every Sunday morning, she makes a meal in the crock pot before we go to church. And she's learned to make tortilla soup. So why don't you all come over to the house and have her make tortilla soup? So we saw, how she referenced the written recipe. We saw how she located things in the freezer. We saw her strategies for measuring, for testing all of the tortilla soup. And then her mom said, oh, do you girls want a copy of the recipe? And we all said, sure. And so the young woman went over to the computer. She turned on the computer. She found the file that had all the recipes that her sister had collected in the file. She then found soups, scrolled down, clicked on soups, scrolled down, found tortilla soup, and then she said 3 copies, and her mom said, yeah, 3 copies. So she inserted the number 3, hit print, and handed us each a copy. So throughout that activity, which was meaningful to her, we saw lots of information about skills, about interests, about performance. We were able to interview her mom, in addition to observing the activity, about, how did you teach her to measure like that? And her mom said, I have a vision in my head of how you measure dry ingredients, and you scoop them out, you level the top with your knife, and I just continually repeat that, starting maybe with a visual, then providing some physical assistance if needed, until she has it down, and then I back off. So again, you're looking for all these pieces of information that are going to help you identify the characteristics of that successful job for the person. You're also going to participate in some unfamiliar activities. And this may be something the person has wanted to do or has an interest in, but they've never participated in before. For example, for one person, what they chose to do is they wanted to shop for a dress, and it was going to be in a store that wasn't in the town where they lived. It was somewhere they were visiting with family. And so it was an activity that made sense to the job seeker, but also was in a very unfamiliar environment. And part of what we were looking at was, how did this person respond to some of the natural cues in the store? It was a familiar chain, but the setup of the store was different from the store she was used to. And also, obviously, she didn't know the people who worked in the store. Would she find what she wanted? Would she ask for assistance? And all that information we were going to then translate into possible support needs and strategies for her first day of work, which was going to be obviously was going to be unfamiliar to her if it was the first day of work. So tips for observations. What you want to be thinking about is you're observing the person, and you want to remove yourself from the observation. You want to step back and just capture the facts about their performance, about the environment, about what happened. We want to make sure that we're not stepping in and having our judgment bias the observation. So think about just capturing just the facts. If I'm observing somebody making tortilla soup, I want to describe what she did in a way that somebody who wasn't at that house that day can pick up that written description and see it in their heads as well. I want to have enough information in those observation notes that you can determine whether or not the person was motivated to perform that activity, to participate in that activity. Did they stop and need to be reminded to keep going between every step? You know, without saying it, it would kind of look like they weren't very motivated to participate, or there was a frown on their face the entire time. I want to be able to indicate that through factual description rather than using adjectives, rather than using judgment. I also want to be able to capture information or describe information that leads the reader to identify, was this a quality performance? What kind of pace does this person work at and move at? What was the level of correctness and quality in the work? Also, how long did they work for? How much did they perform? And we don't want to use, adjectives like they performed quickly and they were on task. That doesn't, what I think is quickly and on task may be drastically different than what somebody else says or thinks. Instead, what I want to look at is how many pieces did they do in a given time period? Was every folder that they collated exactly the same? What kind of support was needed or offered? Again, these are all clues that I'm going to use as the job developer later to create that puzzle of what this final job that's well matched to this person looks like. I'm also looking for skills and tasks that the person exhibits. And also any connections. Are there any people that they're interacting with? Say we're going to the YMCA to participate in a dance class with somebody. It seems like they have a really strong relationship with the person running the dance class, and there's some other woman in the class who calls this person over right from the start and just starts providing some natural supports. Probably that person's going to be helpful in job development, even if they don't even know anything about job development. My guess is that they like this person, they've initiated help in this person, and I'm curious to know where they work and where everybody else they know works. So those are all the pieces you're looking for as you're doing observations. But I guess the big piece is to remove yourself, the person doing the observation, from the activity. You really want to capture information that's not judgmental and very factual and descriptive. So the next piece is that from looking at what you see, your descriptive information about what a person does, you're going to draw out the tasks and look at what tasks the person could do with training. You're going to look for the skills involved in performing the tasks that they do. And then you're going to generalize the skills to additional tasks the person could do. For instance, I was at somebody's home the other day and they saw somebody's lunch bucket on the floor in the living room. So they picked up the lunch bucket and initiated walking out to the garage to put it where it belonged. And what we see about this person is they identify when things are not in their place. They are driven to put things where they belong. And so part of what we're generalizing, or how we're generalizing this information to the future workplace, is that we're looking for a place where all the items, whether it be work items, whether it be products, whether it be items that are being sold, they all have a specific place where they're supposed to be, and they get messed up frequently. So there's a need to get them back in their place. Part of just seeing what he did at home is leading us to that task and the need for that skill in a future position. So finally, in discovery, we're going to look at the records. But again, I really caution you, unless there's a piece of information in those records that you need to keep yourself safe and the individuals safe in the community, that you need to know before you get to know them, wait until after you have a better impression of who the person is. But you're going to look for, is there some medical information, maybe some information on an individual education plan or an IPP? Is there a vocational assessment, maybe a psych eval? And only, again, what you're looking for is any of this information relevant to who the job seeker is today in terms of employment? That's what you're looking for. If there's some past history that really isn't relevant to who the person is today, look at it, but it doesn't need to go in the documents where you're capturing your discovered information. But I would look at some of the past work history. You may also find that there's somebody there that you want some additional information from that you'd like to interview. I'd look at Social Security information to see, is there a potential for a work incentive that can be used to market the person with? Meaning, like, could they buy a resource that makes sense for them, and then you're marketing this person with their resource to prospective employers. And also, it's going to give you a feel about how this person feels about the impact of future wages on Social Security, or how their family feels, and is that going to impact employment? We need to look at all the pieces of information that are going to impact employment for this person. But again, look at what's relevant to employment today. So if the person's in school, look at, there's so many opportunities for discovery during the day. It's taking that opportunity to stop, observe, and again, step back and assume we don't know all the answers, even if we've been working with this individual for years. But look at classroom performance, look at work experiences. One of the most beneficial changes I've seen some of the schools do is capturing descriptive, narrative, robust information from the job coaches at the end of each day on a work experience, so that we really capture all this great information that you have access to about the person during work experience, and make sure that that gets shared with future job developers and the teacher. For classroom performance, something that may not even seem work-related initially, this young man, at the end of every class period, he will go around the room and he picks up all the picture icons that are used to help people identify what they need for materials, what they need, where they need to go next. And part of what he does is he initiates, so he does it without being asked, walks around, picks up all the icons, and then he finds the notebook where the teacher designates certain pages for certain topics of icons, and then he goes ahead and he puts them all back where they belong. And so he's another individual who notices when things are out of place, and so that's a skill, that's a contribution of his, and then he takes the initiative to put things back where they belong. The other piece that you need to look at if you're working in schools is that discovery in the vocational profile is an age-appropriate transition assessment. This can be used as one of your informal assessments for people where some of the comparative, predictive age transition assessments aren't that helpful. This is, this serves as your requirement for Indicator 13. The other piece that I really like about discovery in planning around transition, or in looking at what supports and agencies we need to connect people with, is that through discovery, I get a much better handle on what somebody needs for ongoing supports. And I also can really look at, if I know them well enough to set up a quality job match for them, I'm assuming their performance is going to be better. Their external support needs maybe fewer. That doesn't hold true for everybody. There's certain people, just due to medical or maybe legal issues, where they need somebody with them all the time. But there was a young man that I worked with, and what we found after discovery was that this is a young man that works best in a mostly male situation, working around the same people, working around a supervisor that was pretty clear about the expectations and when you cross the line for poor social behavior. He really enjoyed being physically active and doing tasks that showed off how strong he was. For him, in a setting that didn't emphasize those conditions, his performance was pretty poor. And it looked like he needed far more ongoing supports than he did. It looked like he was going to need some intensive job coaching. And so basically when he was referred to voc rehab, he was told, or his family was told, that he needed to wait until there were some extra supports available, such as state-funded developmental disability supports, before they could place him. Had we placed him in a situation where he was at his best and the natural supports were readily available to keep him on task and keep him focused, then I believe he would have gone straight to employment. But we hadn't done discovery early enough in his school career and gotten that ball rolling to really show off what he could do in a well-matched position. And so in customizing, we really need to understand these 5 components through discovery before we can move towards job development. We need to understand the conditions for success, whether they be support, whether they be conditions of the environment, whether they be time of day, conditions of the tasks, all of that. We also need to understand what's going to motivate the person to work. Looking at, can we tie some jobs to preferences and interests? And again, that's not the first place we go in our job search. We're really looking at the ideal conditions first. We're also looking at, if we are going to go market this person to an employer, as a job developer, I need to explain to the employer how it's going to benefit them. What are this person's contributions? What are their personality attributes, their skills, the tasks they can bring to the employer? And then I'm going to look at specific employers based on the individual. So in discovery, I think, to think about how discovery helps is it helps us reframe what we perceive to be barriers to employment and community membership. We reframe those barriers into the ideal conditions for success for somebody and the needs they have for support to be successful in an inclusive environment. And so in discovery, we focus really on how somebody can participate, not why they can't. So I'm going to leave you with a few resources that have information about discovery and about customized employment that you can download, you can share with families, with job seekers, with other staff. And so the first one is the Rural Institute website, and that's the University of Montana Rural Institute. There's lots of products and webinars archived there. Also, Mark Golden Associates has a lot of articles on customized employment, and also discovery. Griffin Hammis has loads of information on self-employment and wage employment, all around customized employment. Lots of training opportunities through there as well. And then the Office of Disability Employment Policy, ODEP, has some DVDs that are downloadable so that you can share with employers, with families about customized employment. There's a lot of fact sheets archived on their website, as well as a toolkit for employment. So please check out those resources, and thanks for tuning in today.